and welcome back, fellow foolish mortals, to the most foolish channel on the internet. So today I'm going to talk to you about Disney music, and specifically the Disney Renaissance period of music. So of course Disney music is a huge part of my heart, as it is for so many other people out there. So I feel like I've actually been researching this my entire life, because it is something that I'm quite passionate about. If you want to know more, I will leave links in the description for you to have a look up, and some sources for you to research further, if that's something you want to do. So I'm specifically looking at the Disney Renaissance period of Disney music today. So that basically goes from The Little Mermaid all through to Tarzan and Phil Collins, essentially. So I really love this era of Disney music. I mean, I grew up with this era of Disney films in general, and I can safely say that I know the music really, really well to this period specifically, and I know all the lyrics pretty much. I'm sure a lot of people know the lyrics to pretty much every single Disney song of this era. And of course, because Disney has been going on for so long, for many years, I can't look at every single part of Disney music all in one video. And obviously there's so much music, I mean, like including ride music and area loop music, but it's just this specific part that I'm going to be looking at. So unless you want to sit down with me and have a chat about this stuff for absolutely hours, I can't cover every single part of Disney music all in one hit. But do let me know if you want me to talk more about that stuff. I mean, I'm happy to look into it further, I'm happy to talk about that further. Like I said, it's a big part of my heart. I mean, honestly, like Disney music is like the jam to my jam donut, if that makes sense. Like, it's something within Disney that I definitely enjoy, something that I really like within Disney. And I really enjoyed this. I think I've listened to the soundtracks of the Disney Renaissance era more than I've actually watched those movies, maybe? Probably. So before I can look back at the specific era of Disney songs and Disney music, I have to first take you back through the history of musical theatre. The history of musical theatre even actually came from opera. So we have to look at opera. So the first opera was back in ancient Greece. They were doing their shoo-ba-ba-da ding dong, they sing You're the One That I Want. No wait, that's the other Greece. No, ancient Greece is in the country. Yeah, so that's where the actual opera first came from. So the first ever opera that we know of as a Western culture, I suppose, was actually called Daphne, and I think I'm pronouncing that right. They basically took traditional Greek dramas and added music to them. They had the Greek chorus that would sing and dance to move the plot along. So this is essentially where opera came from, but obviously that's down to the most basic level. So opera was born and it was made popular in Western culture. So you get some really long operas as well. So you have essentially within the opera a recitative and an aria. So a recitative would sort of move the plot along, and it could go on for quite a while. And then an aria was where a character would basically stand on stage and just talk about their feelings, what they wanted. So basically an aria is where a character would just scream on stage about their emotions and what they really wanted. So then from opera came operetta. Operetta essentially started the musical theatre movement. So it basically got rid of the recitative and just stuck with arias. It made it more humorous and more palatable to the common scum like you and me. So what they actually did with the recitative is they didn't get rid of it completely, because obviously they have to move the plot along. They actually just turned it into dialogue so that it moved a little bit faster. So essentially you just had speak, emotion song, speak, emotion song. You follow that? So that's the operetta, but it could also be humorous. When I say about a character's emotion, I mean like any sort of feeling, whether that's loving or loneliness or loathing or any emotion. Basically they could just talk or sing about their emotions. So in 1866 came the first musical theatre that we sort of know as musical theatre today, with that sort of structure. So that very first musical theatre was actually called The Black Crook, and the musical is set in 1600 Harz Mountains in Germany. But if you're familiar with musical theatre structures and musical theatre tropes and types, and how it sort of moves along, maybe go and have a listen to You Naughty, Naughty Men. So you can find that on YouTube. But if you have a listen to it, you'll be able to distinguish what I mean. This is definitely part of the musical theatre genre. So it's known as the first musical theatre. I mean, it might not be, but that's sort of what is argued to be the first musical. So you might be sat there asking, what the heck are you doing just talking about musical theatre constantly? What has this got to do with the Disney Renaissance era? Well, it has everything to do with the Disney Renaissance era, actually. Because the thing is, the Disney Renaissance era was actually musical theatre driven. So together, Howard Ashman and Alan Menken actually got together and created these animated musicals, and basically created a spiral of amazing Disney movies. Of my favourite era of Disney movies. So musical theatre, it's sort of known that you talk, and then when the emotion gets too much to talk, you sing, and when it gets too much to sing, you then dance. And this is really easily found within Disney movies, especially in that era. So have a look at the Sidekick Songs, for instance. Have a look at Friend Like Me. So it starts with speaking, it moves up to singing, and then we've got a big dance number at the end. It's actually Howard Ashman who said that what he wanted within the movies of Disney was, if you took a song out of these movies, then it shouldn't make sense. You need to move from A to B within these songs, so it's almost like a recitative. But you need to either understand what's going on with the character and their emotions, so that the plot doesn't actually make sense without the song, or it actually adds to the plot and moves it along. So if you took it out, it just didn't make sense. So this sort of makes sense again with Friend Like Me. Genie advertises himself as a good pal, and then at the end they are good pals, and he's got a friend like him. So this huge build-up from speaking to a musical spectacular and dancing and the full-blown works has now made them good friends. And obviously you do have some numbers that are really similar. For instance, Jellicle Songs for Jellicle Cats. So you might have that song, could be quite similar to Arabian Nights. It's an opening number, it sets the scene. It doesn't really tell us much about the emotions, but it just gets you the feel of what's going to be happening. And then this sort of feel then leads across the entire musical, so that it sort of slots right into the same idea. So this whole idea of taking musical theatre, you essentially have to have an I want song in musical theatre. So the main character, the hero, potentially the leading lady, will have a sit and talk about exactly what she wants and what she dreams of, which is obviously quite a common trope within Disney films. But this is even stranger because they were genuinely thinking about cutting part of your world from The Little Mermaid, which is essentially the aria of the film. It's her I Want. So that is really mind-boggling, and not because it's a classic song that we now know today, but because it is such a trope in musical theatre that we really look for. And it's really a trope that should be within Disney movies as well, if you're going to be doing a musical theatre animation. So with Ariel and Part of Your World, she's literally telling the audience, so us, exactly what she wants. She wants to be a part of the world over there. She wants to be a human. So what they do is they actually have the part of your world as a main leitmotif. A leitmotif is essentially music that's associated with a thing, a place, a character, an idea. So that's what a leitmotif is. So the that actually follows Ariel around everywhere, essentially. Anything that's to do with the world and her dream. So it's actually in the beginning, it's obviously is her aria or her I Want song, and it even comes back in full force for the wedding, and it's all like choral and everything like that. And then obviously within the villain song, they use that as well. So when she's giving her voice to be, that's what she wants, that is her leitmotif, it follows her around, it represents something that she is and she hopes for and dreams for. So for the risk of sounding too technical or anything, it basically just follows Ariel around. and it emotionally just connects us, the audience, to her and her wants. Similarly, we wouldn't connect as much to that final scene where they have the if it wasn't for her aria, and if it wasn't for how it moved throughout the entire story. It's not just The Little Mermaid that does this, it's almost every single musical theatre. It is pretty much within many different soundtracks, and not just Disney either, but actual movies, like movies that are like action movies or emotional movies or dramas or comedies. They have this leitmotif that can follow an idea around, which makes you emotionally connect more to the story. In musical theatre, you might have the unlimited thing that follows Elphaba around. So whenever she's about to do something magical or she feels magical or powerful, she has the unlimited and it comes back into the actual score as well, so it connects us more with her journey. So the idea of leitmotifs actually came from some dude called Wagner. So what he actually did was he created a really long opera, and basically had a leitmotif pretty much for every single character and every single idea. So what you could do is follow the entire journey of the characters without actually understanding what they were saying. You didn't actually have to be able to even look on stage. You can hear what's going on. You can know who is on stage and what's going on based on their leitmotifs. So today, even in films and musicals, you have leitmotifs that carry the plots through. Like the Dies Irae, so this is a thing that represents death, and we're subconsciously know that this represents death without maybe even knowing that this is the Dies Irae. This is something from like way back in the day, and they used it to play at funerals, and obviously it's also in a minor key, so that makes us automatically associate in Western culture with bad things. So minor equals bad in Western culture, because that's what we've been trained in our brains to associate. And also the Dies Irae really literally means the day of wrath. So you can actually see this Dies Irae within so many different movies, not just the Disney movies and not just big budget Hollywood movies that might not be a musical. It's in Lion King, but it's also in Groundhog Day, it's in Harry Potter, it's in Frozen, Sweeney Todd, Star Wars, Home Alone, Nightmare Before Christmas, It's a Wonderful Life, and The Shining. I think you'll see it probably most in The Shining and also Sweeney Todd. So the list really goes on. There's literally a huge list on the internet of different movies that use the Dies Irae, and we have automatically come to associate this with death. So this doesn't necessarily mean they are going to die, this character will die, but it's the death of something. So we've been socially conditioned to associate this musical phrasing with death, so when we hear it, we know that death surrounds it. So leitmotifs are actually really apparent in film scores as much as they are in musical theatre. If you want to train your ear to understand leitmotifs, what I do personally is watch a Pixar movie. So quite specifically, have a look at Up. So Up will make you cry within the first 30 seconds, and I'm sure we've all been bawling our eyes out at the first 30 seconds of Up. And the way that they do this is with not necessarily the visuals, though obviously they play a part, but the leitmotif. So basically, the leitmotif of Ellie that plays throughout, and it becomes actually associated with the adventure throughout the rest of the movie. But the reason that it might make you feel sad is because it's played in a major or happy, and it's also actually played at the funeral scene. That subconsciously tugs on your heartstrings. But if you'd actually watched that movie and there'd be no sound at all, just for that first 30 seconds, then that may not pull on your heartstrings as much, because it's that constant use of Ellie's theme, because there's variations of it as well. You don't necessarily need to have just the same thing over and over again. There are variations of the leitmotif. And Pixar does it really well, and also if you want to still train your ear further with musical theatre, I definitely say to listen to Sondheim. And as we're talking about leitmotifs, why don't we just quickly touch on the repetitiveness in music? Though this actually does have a lot to do with the Disney Renaissance era. I haven't strayed too much far from topic. It does actually have a point. So let's think about this. that same 4-chord structure that we're all familiar with, right? We know this is safe, this 4-chord structure. This is a safe 4-chord structure. We know where it's going, and it's been repeated for forever. We've heard this in nursery rhymes, and we've also heard it in our pop songs. We know it's not dangerous in any way to us. We know what to expect. And this isn't because we're born instinctively liking that 4-chord sequence. I mean, look at different music around the world. So I'm just talking about Western culture here with that 4-chord sequence. By exposing somebody over and over and over to the same thing, we actually then are conditioned in our brains to enjoy it. So we're conditioned to know what to expect. We know what to feel because of the sequence. So this is why, for whatever reason, pop music, so popular music, usually does sound the same. It's because we're conditioned to enjoy this. It's similarly, you can listen to something on the radio and not enjoy it, and then you hear it again and again. As you're walking around shops or something, you might hear it again, and then eventually you may actually enjoy that by the end of it. Not necessarily, but this is usually when it's subconsciously going in. This is just because it becomes familiar. So it's not necessarily that this will work every time, but studies do show that overexposure to certain things can make you enjoy it. Not necessarily just in music, but in many cases. Similar with fashion, you may think, ooh, skinny jeans were gross, and then you end up wearing skinny jeans because you're overexposed to them. So this is a similar way to actually what Disney does. Disney actually uses repetitiveness really well because we understand that Disney structure. So essentially what Howard Ashman and Alan Menken did was create a Disney animated musical theatre extravaganza fit for the stage. So this is why the Disney Renaissance period actually translates really well to stage. We've got The Lion King, we've got Beauty and the Beast, we've got Aladdin, so it actually really does fit really well. So musical theatre is why you would usually have the big sweeping, soaring number. For instance, you know how we said about how we build up from spoken word to song to dance? And quite often these sort of big sweeping numbers will go spoken, build up further, and then go back to spoken or simmer down to something less, and then maybe have a massive key change, wham pam bow. And you've got the big orchestra coming in and making your tear jerking. So take for instance the generic pop song. That has a structure, right? So you may have verse, chorus, bridge, chorus, maybe a key change if we're lucky. The pop songs overall are just really repetitive, which is why they are popular. It's not hard to learn the lyrics to a pop song. It's not hard to understand where they're going to go next because we've heard it a million times. We're pretty much within the same key, the same time signature. They don't really do anything huge or go anywhere big. Okay? And then you take on the musical theatre structure. So with musical theatre structures, you may have a change in time signatures. A lot of them have multiple key changes. A lot of them have a lot more words. So instead of having a specific chorus that's repeated and repeated, you may have specific words that are repeated. For instance, take Colours of the Wind, for instance. Colours of the Wind says Colours of the Wind a lot, but it doesn't have a set chorus. Like the chorus does change slightly. So with a musical theatre song may take you from A to B to C to whatever on a big journey. A pop song will pretty much just sort of start at A and finish at A. Occasionally you might get to B if you're lucky. But you can see this also in the pop versions of Disney songs. For instance, the Let It Go pop version, the How Far I'll Go pop version, the Reflection pop version, versus the musical theatre version of it. So these sorts of musical theatre tropes can actually be found all over the Disney Renaissance period. So you will pretty much, not necessarily in this order, but pretty much you will have a setting, an I Want song, a razzle-dazzle sidekick song, a villain song, a humorous comic relief moment, and you have some sort of choral big thing at the end that's sort of a non-diegetic sound to the rest of everything, so the cast don't hear it necessarily. So that's essentially musical theatre just stripped to the most basic levels, and obviously there's lots of different variations of musical theatre, but I'm just sort of talking about this type of musical theatre. And this isn't even getting to the best part of Disney movies. Well, it's Disney movies for this era, which is the villain song. Oh my gosh, shocker, right? Just going to talk about a villain song. So if you are new here, then hi, do you want to subscribe? Thank you. But I actually really enjoy villains, and specifically this era of Disney villains. So I'm not going to sit here and talk about how Hades should have had a big sort of sassy jazz musical number like King of the Jews or Wonderful or something. I mean, he needed that sassy musical number, but I'm not here to sit and talk to you about what could have been and should have been. I'm here to talk about what actually is. Okay, so for instance, take Poor Unfortunate Souls. I'm shocked she's going to talk about Ursula again. Hello, Ursula is amazing. But Poor Unfortunate Souls is really similar in its sort of structure and its feel to When You're Good to Mama from Chicago. Just think about that for a minute. It's kind of like, this is my version of me, right? It's a little bit false, it's a little bit teasy, it's a little bit sassy. And of course another thing with the villains, they're in minor keys for the most part. They're in minor keys, which is the bad keys, like we said about before. We're conditioned to associate minor with bad, again through repeating that this is bad. Except for this one, right? In this period. So obviously we know that Claude Frollo is actually a bad dude. He's a villain. However, his song shifts from minor to major. Okay? So that shifts from good and bad. So actually Frollo believes in himself, and now he is worried about sinning, okay? So he is actually being pulled within the music, good and bad. He's praying for like forgiveness and for strength, but he's also feeling like pulled to Esmeralda. I would have loved to have sat in on that pitch meeting when they were like, hey, I've got an idea to put in a kids film. This concept for a child's film. I mean, that's bizarre, isn't it? But regardless, you can hear in the music, not necessarily the lyrics, that he is actually being pulled from good and bad, and he is fighting this internal struggle within himself. So even without listening to the lyrics, you can hear his struggle. It's really cleverly done. You can just hear heaven's light within that song. So you know when Quasimodo sings about heaven's light, you can hear that moment within Hellfire. You can hear him literally being pulled between Hellfire and Heaven's Light. And I'm still waiting for the Hunchback of Notre Dame West End show. And you can hear within, obviously, some of the villain songs as well, some of the hero songs. So for instance, let's take The Lion King, for instance. The Circle of Life has the similar feel to I Just Can't Wait to Be King, which is the I Want song of Simba's journey, and then it's also got that similar feel to Be Prepared, which is obviously the Scar song, the villain song. So this isn't actually a leitmotif, but it just sets the feel with like the same instruments, the same sort of structures, just like how you wouldn't be able to, if you took for instance Reflection, that wouldn't fit into Lion King. And rather than an I Want song, usually a villain will get the I Am song, or This Is My Plan song, or the They Are song. For instance, Gaston's got the They Are song. So obviously if Gaston was to have a song in a major key that talked about how much he loved Belle, that he wants Belle to be his wife, and then he had another song later on, again in a major key, about, you know, how he has to go and kill the beast because he has captured the lady that he loves, and now it's the honourable thing to go and kill the beast, and that she's been brainwashed to believe that the beast is like a good guy now. And I mean, would then probably tug on our heartstrings, and we would probably think, oh, we want to root for Gaston. Especially as well if Belle didn't have a song at all. Basically, we need to be emotionally kept distant from our villains, so we know who to root for. We need to root for the guy singing in major, who have dreams. So of course I can't sum up an entire era of Disney music in one hit, but I'll tell you why we like it. Our brains. So these stories are actually written on a wavelength that we can already predict, and that we can already perceive before we've even heard the songs. So we can already, before watching something, if you've never seen a Disney Renaissance movie, you'll be able to predict exactly what is going to happen through the story, because we know how to perceive the story through the music. And lastly, we've got the major versus minor, we've got the good versus evil. So this is why, as well, Frozen and Moana are so popular. And the same with Tangled. They've all got that same structure. It's got the same structure, which then makes us feel nostalgic to something we haven't actually heard yet. So we go and watch Frozen. For instance, my generation now has children. They may have grown up with The Little Mermaid, and now they're bringing their children with them to go and watch Frozen or Moana or Tangled, and then that same structure is then appealing because they understand that structure, they grew up with that structure, they can feel nostalgic to something they actually haven't seen yet. And it's not because it's not new, but it still follows the same tropes, it still follows the same structures. So that makes our brains go, oh, this is good, this is nostalgic, this is my moment, this is old Disney as I knew it. So tropes aren't necessarily a bad thing. For instance, like the hero's journey, you've got Star Wars, you've got Harry Potter, you've got Lord of the Rings. They all have the exact same structure in their stories, right? So they have the hero, they've got like villains, they've got a big mission that they have to go through, and they've got to defeat the villain, and they've got an old dude who's going to be like the wise guy, you know, and teach them stuff, and then they die. So this is literally the tropes. This is what we come to expect. This is what we know. It's what's familiar. What automatically makes us enjoy it. It's because it's familiar. And this is exactly what Disney do. They take those tropes, those musical leitmotifs, and carry you through the entire story to a structure that you understand and that you're familiar with. So your brain just does that thing. Like they know. They know what to expect, even though consciously you may not know. I mean, there's a reason why Alan Menken has written so many different Disney movies now. Well, Disney soundtracks. And obviously he's good at it. He knows, and obviously he had a musical theatre background along with Howard Ashman. They both have musical theatre backgrounds, and both from Little Shop of Horrors as well. And you can actually even watch Little Shop of Horrors and feel those tropes. You can feel that could be a Disney movie. Of course, not the carnivorous plant necessarily, but the musical structure of it is the same as a Disney film. So obviously this is one of the reasons why Disney is looked at as being timeless. So this Disney Renaissance era was already classic before it was classic. I mean, it was, as it came out, it was already nostalgic. As it came out, it was already familiar. And that's literally just looking at the music. This isn't even looking at the animation or the plots or anything else. It's literally just the musical score. This is one of the reasons why it is timeless. Of course, everything else adds into it. The characters add into it. The development of the characters actually add into it as well, and the animation style. But I'm just talking about the music for this specific video. Little Mermaid actually got Disney out of a down period, and it lifted it back up, and then they had hit after hit after hit, just following the structure. And it even gets strange that as soon as they stopped following that structure, they fell back on their bum again. So as soon as they stopped following that, I don't know why they stopped following that structure. Maybe people were bored of that structure. But if you think about it, take Treasure Planet for instance. You can follow the hero's journey exactly the same as you might follow an average hero's journey for other movies. But take Treasure Planet, okay, and you can feel where you can add in the songs for those tropes. And if you added in those songs, maybe Treasure Planet would have been really, really successful. Maybe. I am personally a big fan of the 2D animation, but I'm glad that what they're doing with the 3D animation, this new sort of style, this new generation of Disney animation as it were, I'm glad they're bringing back that sort of structure. Now it's not exactly the same, but it has that feel, it's got some of those main tropes from it. You've got those big box office hits that have got those exact structures that come from those Disney movies, and like I said before, it's like the nostalgia that's there before you even feel that it's nostalgic. It's new, but it's not. It's the same structure. It's exactly the same as Tangled and Moana, same with Frozen. It's a whole new Disney Renaissance era for a new generation, and I'm actually quite excited to see what they're going to do with it. So for instance, I don't know if Raina and the Last Dragon is a musical at all. I don't know if it's got any music in it really, except for maybe a score. But if it is a musical, then I'd like to hear what they've got. I hope that it is along the same structure as Frozen and Moana. I mean, I don't think it's a whole coincidence that they're bringing in musical theatre experts into Disney, you know, for instance, Lin-Manuel Miranda. And let's be honest, we can't have too many Disney songs to be able to belt out in the shower and annoy our neighbours with. And I'm not saying that every single Disney song is the same. I'm not saying every Disney movie is the same from this era. I'm saying that it follows the same structure. And I'm saying that that's clever. and the way that it sort of psychologically impacts in our brains, what to expect and how to feel nostalgic, and how Disney literally tugs at our heartstrings using like leitmotifs, for instance, and for using those familiar musical theatre structures. Same thing if you liked pop music. You may say, oh, I love pop music, but you can't deny that it follows the exact same sort of structure. It doesn't necessarily mean that you find them all exactly the same. You can distinguish all the songs and such, but it's the same structure, and that's what I'm saying that this is. So let me sum up about why the Disney Renaissance period is actually the best, musically, best part of Disney. It's nostalgic and it uses music to tell a story. You can remove all the lyrics and still follow the exact same story. And by using that cookie-cutter structure, I think it's actually really clever how they've done it. And you can actually, when you watch it, you can feel exactly what's about to happen. You can understand it, and obviously it has the same humour of a musical theatre may have. Sort of, I'll summing up musical theatre in general here, but the sort of musical theatre that I'm talking about. Now obviously this is a slightly different video to normal. It is slightly more educational, but I hope that you guys actually enjoy this sort of thing. If you want to hear more educating type thingies, then do let me know. I do actually enjoy this sort of thing. Like I said before, Disney music is in my heart. Musical theatre is also in my heart, and obviously I can't sum up all Disney songs within this one era, same as I can't sum up all musical theatre, everything in one era. There's lots of different types of musical theatre, there's many composers, there's many different structures, and there's definitely many songs out there. And obviously as well, I can only just sort of go off what I've read and heard myself and my own sort of theories, but I will leave sources below. Obviously I'm not like a brain scientist or anything. I don't have like I don't have like I don't have a psychology degree or anything like that. I'm sure you can gather that. But at school I kind of remember colouring in the different parts of the brain. I would definitely recommend watching Little Shop of Horrors and picking out all those Disney tropes. I would definitely recommend listening to You Naughty Naughty Men from the very first musical theatre, and I would definitely recommend going back and watching those first 30 seconds of Up and just picking out the Ellie theme and try not to cry. And please do add to the conversation with your own theories and your favourite era of Disney music and why. Like, why do you think that that might be? Again, I'm happy to talk about this sort of thing if you want me to. And I hope you learnt something, I suppose. But thank you so much for coming and listening. If you're not already subscribed, then feel free to do so, and do leave a thumbs up as well. It makes me really happy when people like my videos. It gives me like a spurt of joy in my heart for every thumbs up I see. So thank you so much, and I hope that you have a magical day. Bye!